I'm calling our next speaker, Dr. Tomer Shadmy from the Safra Center and the Interdisciplinary Cyber Center in Tel Aviv University, and she'll talk about human rights by design. Do internet giants lock our legal imaginary? Take it from here.
Oh, did you just steal the microphone?
Oh, yeah.
I did.
This is Russian.
I'm Ukrainian.
Okay. So hello, I'm very happy to be here. And that's all. Okay. So my argument for today's talks will be that Facebook reconstructs our imaginary notion of rights. The company places a digital layer over our connection with each other, and I argue that with these digital layers come also a new notion of rights. 2 billion users experience substantial portion of reality through the mediation of Facebook. As my study reveals, these users get unique answers to questions such as what rights are, what do we owe to each other, what is a connection between communities and rights. The answers to these questions are not writing answers, but practice-based answers which the user acquires by navigating through the design and the architecture of the platform. My study demonstrates how these answers shape a new image of right. This image implication, I will argue, could go far behind each user personal feed. So right are the very central notion of the modern legal and political thinking and practice. In the modern world of ideas, human rights' main purpose has been to limit political power. And at the same time, it was a tool for political and individual emancipation. An in-depth examination of Facebook design, technology, and rhetoric revealed that rights continue to play a central role in the platform, but the meaning of the concept has changed. So in my previous research, I identified contemporary transformation inside the human rights dialect. These transformations are byproduct, among other things, of the growing involvement of multinational corporations in the field. Since the 90s, many argue for the need to impose more substantial human rights obligations on corporations. This pressure led to the creation of various mechanisms in which, most of them software mechanisms, in which corporations are required to give attention to human rights. In my previous study, I argued that those mechanisms are not simply apply the old human rights duties on new actors, but actually have changed the meaning of human rights duties. And if the duties are changing, so obviously also rights are changing. So here I will demonstrate how Facebook changes the meaning of rights. So for me, Facebook is actually just a test case for a wider development, but as a matter of fact, it's not a test case, but the test case, because the power of Facebook is enormous today. I don't need to convince you in that. So against this background, many scholars, not many, some scholars, ask the important question, does Facebook violate human rights, or maybe it promotes them? I don't ask this question. I think it's important, and I think in some cases Facebook violates rights, and in other cases maybe it promotes them. But my point is different. I think that Facebook does another very important thing which the literature tends to ignore. Facebook, I argue, is also reinventing human rights, reinventing the imaginary notion of rights. So, what is the imaginary notion of rights? We all, or maybe the lawyer between us, are familiar with the theory of rights, and law and society literature taught us about the practice and law in action in which rights in practice are different. So the imaginary notion of rights is the mechanism that connects between those two fields. It is a way that we collectively justify and understand our ways of living together, our practices, our institution. The imaginary, according to Charles Taylor, is the way ordinary people, not the academia or other people, but ordinary people, imagine and justify the social surrounding. So, in order to find out what is the imaginary notion in Facebook, I identified the basic feature of right as we used to know them in the modern Western tradition. And using the tools of discourse analysis, I asked what is happening to this basic feature in the platform. So my materials was some open sources of the company since 2012 when the company became public company. And then I check the platform design and features and technology, what is open to the public. Facebook rules and policy, of course, Facebook financial report and communication with investors, official Facebook pages, public conferences, and Mark Zuckerberg posts and speeches. It's important to note here that for me, the imaginary notion of right in Facebook is not a byproduct of some conspiracy by the corporation that want to change the existing perception of right, but it's a joint and dynamic and interactive co-production of the company, of its user, and of the legal system and of many communities and countries. So relying on this methodology, I found that Facebook version of right is very different from the modern notion of right. And now I will give you just some samples of my finding. So, first of all, while the realization of right have always been a private matter, the formulation has been public and political. In the imaginary level, at least, we all participate together in the right formulation in our political communities through democratic procedure and through public deliberation. In Facebook, right keeps to be collective political project. Here, the formulation become a private matter. In general, the company is the legislative, executive, and judicial authority. It sets the rules for its user without their intended involvement. So, but in some very limited cases and following criticism, Facebook does involve the user in shaping the rules. But when the company tries to do that, it actually promotes and reveals a new notion of political participation, democracy, and rights. This quote is taken from Mark Zuckerberg manifesto, or later to the public from 2017. In this manifesto, he mentioned the criticism on Facebook censorship, whatever. For example, like we just spoke about the taking down post of Raya Sarkar, of that's and Black Lives Matter, for example, and at the same time allowing for hateful content and accounts. So Zuckerberg's solution to this very, really complex multicultural problem is socio-technical solution. And I quote, "The idea is to give everyone in the community option for how they would like to set the content policy for themselves. Where is your line of nudity, on violence, on graphic content? What you will decide will be your personal setting." So according to this solution, questions such as what is a permissible limits of violence or what is pornography, question that's located at the heart of our political sphere and shape the ways of living together and shape the content of the local image of human rights, become in Zuckerberg's vision private questions in which each user decides for herself out of the possibilities that the cooperation provide and articulate. Another example is this privacy setting that exists also today. And here you can see the multiple choice questionnaire in which users are called to choose their privacy setting toward other users. It's of course not toward the company, because in this matter we don't have any right to privacy. But toward the other user we have these questionnaires. And here also the user choices do not affect the characteristic of the right to privacy for the whole platform, but just for themselves. So what I have demonstrated until now is that that in Facebook we experience rights that have lost their political rule as a mechanism for collective decision making. Now I will argue that rights on Facebook also lose their social rule as a tool for shaping relation between equals based on mutual respect. The modern tradition establishes unbreakable bond between rights and their collective duties. I have rights, and this right generates duties on others, and without those duties, my rights have no meaning. So I found that in Facebook, Facebook enables us to practice our rights without the need to impose the correlated duties on others. This includes even the minimalistic duty to respect the other right. So to the left, you can see the Pride and Tolerance parade in Jerusalem last year. The people who marched exercised their rights, and all the others were obliged to respect and tolerate those rights, whether they like it or not. This mutual respect is a vice imperative of the liberal Western social and political tradition. To the right, you can see the Rainbow Pride reaction button, which Facebook devoted in 2017 to celebrate Pride Month. Here too, people can exercise their right and react with this reaction, but Facebook predicted who will not like this button, and for this user, Facebook did not present the button at all, and even hided the reaction of their friend that used the button. In doing so, Facebook transformed the obligation to respect the right of others to an unnecessary feature. Pride parades are about accessing equal rights in public, even if doing so hurt the feeling of others. These others are obliged to respect, tolerate, and enable the pride to proceed down the public roads. Facebook technology and policy make it possible to abolish this obligation that stand at the center of modern Western culture. The quote here is again from Zuckerberg manifesto, where he suggested that content should simply not be shown to anyone whose personal control suggests they would not want to see this. He said, each person should see as little objectionable content as possible, and each person should be able to share what they want. So here again, what Zuckerberg actually suggested that in one that one will have like limitless freedom of expression, and the other will have limitless right not to be offended by this expression. So the coexistence of these conflicting rights is possible due to technology that enable people not to be exposed to choices of others. So in this brave new world, writers still triumph, but their victory does not demand anything from anyone except the development of AI to monitor the content. So therefore, as we saw in the last slides, in Facebook, the user practice a new form of community decision-making and right. These are mediated community, which every member is isolated and could influence the formulation of right, but just for herself. The use of Facebook enables people to enjoy membership in group without having to participate in the design of the group rules and without needing to respect and protect the other people's right. Facebook does not do it against the will of its user. To the contrary, this structure is a byproduct of the co-production of many actors, including the users themselves. My point here is that through this practice, through this structure, right could lose the social, political, and collective character in our shared imagination. So now I just will speak quickly about the enforcement of right. Here you can see when one wants to report on her right violation, you have those questionnaire. It's structured questionnaire with no place to argument, with no place to discourse. And if you don't find one of those options as suit to your experience, you cannot do anything. In contrast, in the modern world, rights was about discourse, about argumentation, interpretation, and here there's no free place for expression, and the users here are constrained by code. They generally cannot effectively negotiate it with a platform using word. So it's changed also our imagination about what is right. So another thing with the enforcement in Facebook, it's the automatic enforcement. Facebook have ex-ante enforcement and ex-post enforcement. Some ex-ante enforcement is like AI prohibit for posting something, and then if you want to post it, it does not allow you. And there is also ex-post enforcement in which if you break the community standards, so your account, the post can be deleted, or your account can be deleted. So in one action, Facebook acted on behalf of the three branches of power with no separation. So it is not just that discourse, argumentation, and interpretation are not part of the practice of right, but that we get regular to automatic enforcement in which, with no transparency, no voice, and no option to resistance. And now I want to conclude and speak about the future. So the power of the company to shape the collective imagination lies in its ability to translate abstract ideas regarding the meaning of right and materialize them and transform them into part of our reality. What we see in familiar surrounding looks right, and it may condition and constrain our sense of justice. When users sit in their very personal living room and just purring over the very personal feed, they experience a contingent form of right. This form shapes the way we experience and imagine rights and the rules in society. So the interesting thing with the imagination, the collective imagination, is the way it connects the past, the present, and the future. It relies on some past notion, and it changes all the time in the present, and in a way it dedicates the future. So in this study, I demonstrate how users of Facebook experience a new conceptualization of right, and it's happening right now, but it could dedicate legal and political future. So the aim of this study is not to glorify the modern conception of right and to argue for the need to restore it also in the platform, not at all. Instead, it points on the way in which rights are being reinvented today. And I think we need to reinvent rights and to make them good for the world, the data-driven world. But the open question is who and how to reinvent them. Thank you.